Welcome to the George Lynch Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Legendary Gear. The game called company is legend by design. Folks, I'm telling you what, I've been in the hunting industry. I've hunted a lot of different critters out there. One of the things, just because of people I respect, has really grabbed my interest here in the last days here, and totally, I've just been totally absorbed by it. And I'm talking by hours spending on YouTube and watching information. But this is the talk about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call him, the big guy. It's totally, there's a lot of things out there, and what I've found there's a lot of things that you definitely real quick can just distort and put away as trash, but also there is actually some legitimate people that you respect and what they're doing that have come with some concrete evidence and things to come about. And there's some people I respect personally that have these beliefs. And what's led me to a mutual friend, or a relative who's a mutual friend of mine, is our next guest. And this is what his forte and profession is, researching and his experience with Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And folks, I'd love to introduce to you our new friend and podcast guy, Jay Bachochin. Jay, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, George and Diane.
Did I do a job on the last name?
You did. You rocked
Awesome.
it. You rocked it.
I rocked it.
It gets hacked quite a bit, but you know what? You nailed it right on the head.
Actually, it's a super easy name. It's a cool name, easy name to get. Jay, I'll tell you what, you have a mutual friend of Mark Mitten, and Mark and I have been in the hunting industry and talked back and forth. And he's the one, that I've talked to and a little bit about Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And he directed me, said, man, you need to talk to Jay. And it's so cool. Jay, I'd love to hear your story and what you're doing and your background. And you've got some stuff that some of your information, some of your programs where they're at now. But, I respect that you're definitely, that's why you're on this podcast, I feel, is a legitimate investigator, or whatever you want to call it, a Sasquatch. And I never say never on anything, because everything, there's things in the ocean. I've heard before, people saying that, we've only probably discovered 80% of the critters that live in the ocean. So there's still 20% out there. And this deal with, in Sasquatch and some of the remote areas, I think that there's things out there, if they don't want to be found and they want to be left alone, and if they want to have, their quiet and respect of their privacy, they're going to be tough to find. And so I am totally pumped to hear what your story and what you got, because I've really gotten addicted to this. And like I said, real quick, I'll go on YouTube and there's so much out there that you click, and the real quick ones you click off, is junk. But I am totally interested to hear what you got in your background.
Well, thanks. Let me just start by saying my name is Jay Bachochin, and I am of sound mind. All right. It's one of the things you talk about, Bigfoot or Sasquatch or any of the weird cryptids out there. You know what? You got to start looking for that straight jacket, because you're crazy for even remotely thinking of it. But you know what? I grew up kind of that, kind of that kid who would sit in the basement during the summers watching the black and white Godzilla, King Kong, Frankenstein movies. So I've always had that interest. I had brothers and sisters that would be, active and out. And I was the nerdy, pasty white kid who would just love anything supernatural. And it just doesn't mean ghosts, but, UFOs, aliens, all these things kind of sparked my interest, especially in the 70s. I'll date myself a little bit. I guess I kind of did with Creature Features, but, during the 70s, I had to have been about 10 years old. And my mom was driving my older sister back home to us, and I remember it was a Friday night, because I know where she was at. And my sister runs in and she's crying. She's upset. We're being invaded. Huh. And then I kind of look out there, and my other younger brother and older brother, we all walked out there. My mom said, yeah, look at this. She goes, ever since I picked your sister up at the school, we're following, this light's been kind of following us. It's kind of spinning in the sky, just hovering. And the lights would go out. So, it's night and you wouldn't see it. And that would be across the sky. And we're watching this. So there's 5 of us as a witness, and we still talk about it till this day. Never know what it was, but we watched it for about 15 minutes. that there, wow, it was cool, for being my age. That's like 10 or 12, somewhere around there. It was the later 70s. And my grandpa K, was in the early chapters of MUFON in Chicago, and he was really into UFOs his whole life. So that gave us a really strong bond. I just remember him kind of being like Fox Mulder from the X-Files,
Yeah.
or Carl Kolchak from Night Stalker. He wanted to know what the truth was too. So that gave us a really good bond, and it also helped my interest because I was into you know, the werewolf, Frankenstein, creature from the Black Lagoon, all these creatures. I'm like, wow, if that's a UFO, there's got to be aliens. And if there's aliens in it, maybe these other monsters or something are real. So, again, like I said, I was always the black sheep. And that was just kind of my interest. And, going throughout my life, what do I do? I'm a graphic designer, love editing films or movies, and especially today, not back then when I was using the VHS tape and the cutting room floor and doing it that way. That was a drag, but I still did it. So I kind of did that. And of course, in the 80s, Ghostbusters came out, that, another cool paranormal movie to watch. And I wanted to throw that proton pack out and just start looking to see if there was ghosts out there. But I really never, I never, yeah, and I never really did anything up until me and my wife, well, we got married in 2006, and our honeymoon was on the East Coast, and we started in Boston, and we're going right up through Salem. And Salem during Halloween in October, it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Then we, kind of, because we both were kind of avid ghost hunters, TAPS, Ghost Hunters. It was the first thing that was on sci-fi, not like it is today where everything's saturated. And that's when we actually went on like kind of a night tour in Salem with 50 other people. And I was like, this is cool. I'd love to, when we get back, this is what I was telling my wife. I said, when we get back, I want to do this. I want to find what equipment they use. And I want to know that what I'm watching on TV, even though I might have a belief in it, it's still TV, it's still advertising. They have to make it that way so you tune back in. And that's when we came back and we kind of started a group of just a couple people. It ended up being like 10 different people called the Wisconsin Paranormal Investigators. And our slogan was to hunt the truth, because that's what we're out there doing. It's not so much, it's almost like when you're doing investigation or research, you want to debunk it first, prove it second, because if ghost is on your mind and you're investigating a place that's allegedly haunted and you hear something, immediately it goes right to ghost. Well, let's be rational about this. Let's find the meaning behind the sounds that we heard or something that we saw. And we did that for several years until we started having kids, and then she kind of took a back seat, kind of lowered the group. It kind of broke up, and I started I live in Wisconsin, and I live like 15 minutes away from Bray Road. And if anybody out there's ever heard about the legendary beast of Bray Road, it's supposed to be this upright 7-foot canine creature that lives on this rural road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And I'm like, again, my interest is not only ghosts or UFOs, but it's cryptids. So, we call it legend tripping. We just kind of patrol that area, hopefully to have that sighting. Never did. And pretty much after that, because of Bray Road and the driving, we ended up in the Kettle Moraine one night in October. It was like October 19th, 2013. And there's 4 of us, and we just pulled off the road. It was 9:00, dark. I had my infrared digital tape recorder to walk out in the woods and see what's out there. Now, the biggest thing is I never brought up Bigfoot once, did I? In this whole time, I've talked about ghosts, UFOs, the beast of Bray Road, possibly. Never Bigfoot. Bigfoot to me was, Bigfoot riding on Loch Ness Monster and a unicorn with Elvis jumping over rainbows. It literally, I mean, you say Bigfoot, like I said, it's the butt end of every joke. Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever. It's a joke. And that's how I kind of took it. And why? Why would I believe in all these other things and not Bigfoot? Well, because there's been a lot of researchers out there looking for Bigfoot. There's a lot of hunters out there. Where's the proof? If a hunter was out there game hunting and he's going to see one of these creatures, why not take it down, bring it in, be famous and infamous at the same time of killing a Bigfoot, big hairy ape-like creature. Didn't even think about that in that October. I was out there thinking maybe the Beast of Bray Road was out there. I'm thinking a werewolf. Okay. So we're out there and you couldn't have planned it any better. I'm not an Outback Jack. I'm not an outdoorsman. I'm definitely getting to be over the past 10 years. But prior to that, I wasn't. Stay away from ticks, poison ivy, mosquitoes. You know what? Let the woods have that. I'll stay indoors or wherever I'm going to go, looking for ghosts or whatever. But we were out there and distantly we heard what sounded like a cross between, it sounded very simian, but also human, almost like a human trying to make this monkey type sound. And again, when I say I'm no Outback Jack, I don't know. I didn't know every deer call out there or anything, but I was able to record some of this on my crappy digital mic that I was able to extract. Because, at this point, the 3 other people I was with were like, let's get out of here. Something spooked them. And I'm like, all right. So we leave. We're, four guys out in the woods. We're like, yeah, let's go. This is kind of creepy. And for several weeks after that, I was trying to get on the computer and listen to all indigenous animals in Southeast Wisconsin and Wisconsin, nocturnal and daytime, birds, animals, anything to try to match what I recorded. And again, the recording was not the best. Like I said, it was a bad mic, but we all remembered. Everybody was trying. We couldn't find a match. Now, does that mean it was Bigfoot or a dog man? No, it doesn't mean that. It just meant, all right, now I got the bug, because I'm all about hunting the truth for myself, not about trying to prove it for other people, but for me, because I'm like, I want to know what I heard. And so that's kind of the basis. That's my long story intro. Sorry for babbling, but I get really detailed when it comes up to that point. And at that point was the catalyst. That night was the catalyst for me being where I am today.
And you believe that sound that you heard was not something indigenous to the area, but had to be something else and I agree what you're saying. I talk all the time and because we make game calls and I study so much, and every critter has their own dialect, and it isn't a word system that they had. I said every animal is their language is based on emotion. Whether you take a turkey, I can get him to shock gobble. Or a buck and a tending runt chase, on a doe. It's an emotion that causes their vocabulary, whatever it is, whether it's anger, to contentment. Ducks will have a thing, when they're content to their and their feed call. It's a very content call. And in my area, and of course, I've heard owls, and I've studied owls because we're so close to them. Owls can make some freaking noises that you'd swear that it had to be out of something, wah, 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 and you're like, what? That's an owl. And then, but you get used to. And I remember growing up, we had our windows open, and we lived. Our driveway was almost a quarter mile back in the sticks. And at nights we'd hear this weird noise of every night. So finally, my dad and I would get up at night, and every time we'd shine the flashlight, we'd see this red fox at night that was in there. Well, come to find out, as we studied and I talked to the biologist at the college, that was a sound that red fox would make at night at a predator or something trying to protect their young. And so everything had a vocabulary is different. So what I'm saying is, once you become accustomed, and when I'm in a tree stand or I'm out in the field, my ears, I can be half asleep and I'm half deaf as it is. but I've been so well tuned that I can hear a gobble way off in the distance, or I can be half asleep and hear a goose honk or hear the duck. And you've learned to accustom that, but you also learn to accustom if you hear a sound that isn't normal, that isn't what's supposed to be out there.
Exactly. And that's, because I was saying I'm not a hunter. I was in a previous time deer hunting only. But that was back in the 2000s, and I still didn't know every sound. And like you were saying about the red fox, I've learned so much. Now I say I'm a student of the woods, because not only am I identifying tracks better than I was 10 years ago, but also the sounds, whether it's the bird calls, the owl calls, depending if that's at night or during the day, the squirrel, possum, red fox, especially down here in southeast Wisconsin. And those were some of the ones that I was, again, at that point in 2013, I wasn't going to sit here and try to prove that it was some sort of weird something out there. I just wanted to prove what it wasn't, and that's it. And pretty much I didn't see what made the sound. It was intriguing, but I was not able to match it with any of it, with like you were saying about the emotions, with the deer, the bucks, the does, just every different sound. And we couldn't identify that part of it. So like I said, at that point it was, well, maybe there's something to it, because it did kind of sound simian, more simian. And that's kind of the path that I started on at that point.
Some of the noise that when I'm watching YouTube and some of the guys that you record, and that they recorded sounds, and then there's shows that's pretty popular on the TV, and I've watched that because I'm just like a sponge, and I'm really, I guess a big part of me is hoping that it's true, that there really is a Sasquatch, and that he's lived all these years, and but God bless him, he wants to be left alone. But when I listen when they record the voices or the sounds that they hear, that they believe is actually the Sasquatch talking back and forth, I do know that listen to those sounds, and I know I've been out in the woods and camped with coyotes, wolves, and I've heard all that, and they can make some pretty eerie sounds and stuff like that. But I do know that the sounds that they're recording are definitely not coyote, not wolf, which are definitely indigenous to that area. That really, I have never heard anything like that, because I spent a lot of time in the North American, whether it's Wyoming in the mountains and stuff. I've heard mountain lions, but I've never heard anything like they're recording. And so,
and again, the reason why you're out in the woods is for what?
Well, I love being out there for one thing. I'm out there, whether I'm
hunting.
I want to be out in the woods, and if you're hunting or wherever
Right.
you're at, we're camping in the mountains. I mean, because it's a natural thing for us to be in the mountains. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say is that's one of the big ones, because you sound a lot like Mark and Mike when I talk to them, because believe me, we get into these discussions at family functions. It's kind of cool. But it's one of those things that when I started to go out there, and I started going out maybe once every month, then it started turning into every 2 weeks. Now literally it's generally once or twice a week. I feel like I'm kind of beckoned to go up there. That is, if my wife doesn't have plans for me. I start with family first. But but when and this is kind of cool, because this was in October. Now we're going to talk. Let's go to February of 2014. It was during the day. We had a sitter for my son at the time, and she goes, it was a Sunday. She goes, you want to just go for a hike? And it was snowy, and I'm like, yeah. And because she's more indoorsy, I'm more outdoorsy. And 2014, we went up there and went to my normal spot, and we walked through like 1.5 2 foot drifts. Nobody was on the trails. We were actually making the trails, because our gate, we're not stepping up that high to do that. So we're leaving what I call snail trails or anything. You look behind you and you can see our feet just moving through. Well, my wife's hiking while I'm looking, All right. So she kind of gets ahead of me a little bit and kind of goes up and over part of this path on the kettle. And I'm kind of looking around and I'm catching up to her. But I don't see her now because she's up and down and around the bend.
Sounds familiar. My relationship. My wife is always way ahead of me.
Yeah. Well, again, she was there just the hike. For the record, she's there just the hike. And as I'm following her sliding steps, I'm coming up to a part where we're kind of on a kettle, not that steep, but a nice incline going down. And from the top part of the kettle, I see this big imprint. I've seen them before. I've seen rabbits leave them in the snow.
Right.
I've seen deer hop through them and leave that too. The closer I got to this divot, I was like, okay, but it's weird the way it is. Like I said, it was actually still kind of lightly snowing, not down, real heavy snow or anything. But I'm looking, and all of a sudden, I'm kind of perplexed a little bit because I'm like, what am I looking at? This big, deep imprint that actually looked like a foot. I mean, it really did. And all of a sudden, I look over the trail because this was on the left part of the trail that I was following my wife. The next one was on the right side. It had to have been about 3 foot, maybe 3.5 foot over. That was the next one. And I look at that one, and all of a sudden I see another and another, and they were all walking like in this tightrope type fashion. And I'm like, wow, it's curious. I've been brushing up a little bit on Bigfoot since that October. So I'm like, well, that's really interesting. So, kind of tape measure it out, and it was over 17.5 inches. But here's the weird thing is it was a very deep impression, and there was no drag. You try to walk in the snow and try to lift your leg up and not being able to drag to the next area. These were all smashed down, and nothing else was disturbed about it. And it was coming down on a decline on the kettle. And that was like, what is this? So I documented the best I could at that time. Also, now I document with I call it my iPhone 4 because I go through a lot of iPhones up to this point. My iPhone 4. Also, my wife texts, "Where are you?" She didn't just yell it or whatever. Texting technology, and I'm like, and I take a picture of the print that she just walked by. I said, I'm looking at the footprints that you just walked right by. And all of a sudden, she started making her way back, but I still couldn't see her. And now I'm filming the footprints. This is all in my first documentary. And I'm filming the footprints going up into where the path was. And I'm kind of following up to the upper part of the kettle. And just as I do that, I'm starting to hear some wood knocks right in front of me. And I've heard Bigfoot does wood knocks. Again, like you were saying, I was kind of like a sponge at that time where I'm learning. And I'm like, is this real? And I'm filming it, but I'm actually watching with my own eyes because I'm like, it's right there. How your ears will just focus in on that. And I didn't see anything. And it's just went on for 52 seconds and then stopped. And then just as then my wife comes walking around, I'm like, I got to show you this video. And I start showing her the video, and you start hearing the wood knocks, and her eyes got as big as saucers because she thought I was doing that I was trying to mimic finding Bigfoot and knock on trees. Or I'm like, no, as you can see, I'm filming this. The sound is coming from up there. And of course, at that point, she was adventurous and said, well, let's start walking up there. I'm like, cool. And we walk up at the top of the kettle, and we find this good 4-inch, probably a 6-inch tree, beautiful, still at the top, fresh, totally cracked, right at about 6 feet. So by physics, you'd have to go a lot higher to be able to pull that down. And so it's just like, I'm like, it just reminded me of, well, would a scared bear like crawl up there and then get to the very top, and then the weight would just snap it? Whatever it was, totally cracked it. No other trees were touched around it. In fact, she had me try a similar tree right next to it to see if I could, if I could crack it. No, that thing was like in the ground, I mean, it was the same diameter tree. And there was no way of doing anything like that. So it was like, I've got these footprints now. Now I heard some wood knocks, and now I see a cracked tree. again, all of a sudden I'm like, what is this? You know, I tried to debunk it. I really did. I was trying to figure out if somebody got out there before me, because maybe they knew I might have been interested in this, but they didn't know I was going out that Sunday, and it was still snowing. And as a matter of fact, if we didn't go down there, because there was no other tracks down there, when me and my wife we were making fresh tracks, and if we didn't go down there, I'm going to guess in about an hour and a half, those are really going to start to get filled up because it started snowing harder and harder. And I'm like, this is weird. Who would have done it? And again, but the whole thing is, I didn't see what left the prints, and I did not see what made any type of wood knocks, and I didn't see what broke the tree. So again,
From that broke tree, did you see any tracks that left, anything around?
No. I mean, that in the tree looked like it, again, I'm no expert in all of a sudden cracked trees and looking at it, but it was still, I took video of it, and it still smell it. So I'm like, it seemed like it was a very fresh crack. But that's the first thing we did. Yeah, we looked around, and now we're kind of at the top of the kettle and kind of not only looking at the trees below us, but in the trees, just kind of taking a look around, and we didn't find anything. Again, it comes down to, I didn't see what did that. So how can I claim it was a Bigfoot or Sasquatch? You can't. But what you do is start documenting every weird thing. Again, I'm no Outback Jack, still learning how to track animals, which is very hard for me, because I look at the forest and I'm like, it's just all there. But you do have to look really closely to the ground for disturbances. It doesn't have to be a big footprint or anything like that. It could be just about anything. But again, I had something that I couldn't understand, and I had my wife, who's kind of, she teeters on it. When I talk about Bigfoot, she's supportive of me, but she's like, no, maybe she tells me if they existed, they would be in the Pacific Northwest, where the Patterson-Gimlin was filmed. That's where they are. In Wisconsin, no way. But if you look at the Kettle Moraine, it's it's nowhere near some of these other places like Kentucky, Ohio, North Carolina, all these. It seems a little more populated, but the Kettle's huge. It's 55,000 square acres of just forest that goes up 100 miles through the state of Wisconsin. And believe me, you can get turned around there and just as lost and just as dangerous hitting these kettles and stuff and such. So it's that there.
So from Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, I used to go up there all the time to bow hunt, and I'm telling you, there's thousands and thousands of acres. You could go in a section and get totally lost and not come out, and there's not another road till you go completely out of that section. So same way with northern Wisconsin, it's just like the Upper Peninsula. There's so much vast forest up there. I could see and caves and little things that there's no doubt that other things. And my wife is from New Hampshire, and I've been out there in the White Mountains, and it's gorgeous, but there's so much vast country out there.
And you think about it, like you said,
New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Michigan, I mean, anything could happen. The Appalachians, which gets a lot of the tourists. Here's a question I have for you.
Yeah.
I have been through all the years, because of the hunting, and it became a very astute trapper and tracking. I shouldn't say trapper, but tracking, being able to, all the years of hunting deer and stuff and tracking. I've had people call me because I've gotten pretty good at the knack of tracking things and learning, if something disappears and how to put it together and come up and put it together. And one thing I've always asked in my head that, I would love to go out in the Northwest Territory and all the snow that they have. You can't walk without leaving a track. I used to tell people about deer. Well, there's a lot, the deer will be here. Well, excuse me, I don't have to see them to know if a deer here. I do enough
Right,
scouting and I can go by tracks
right.
and I can know their habits. I know just by following their tracks. And if their tracks aren't here, they're not here. And to me, it seemed like some good trackers could get up in the Northwest, especially in the wintertime with all that snow. And dude, it wouldn't take me long if I got on one and you see a track. And that's one thing that my wife and I have noticed, Diane and I, when we're watching this on YouTube, they'll show a track and I totally blow it out well, we have all these plaster, I've blown that out because there's so many people come up with the one track. And it's like, I have a hard time that he's not hopscotch and he's not leaving one track, any animal that if he's got one track, I'm going to find his next one. And especially an animal that big, it's going to be hard for him to walk through and not leave some type of imprint, and especially in the snow. So what I'm saying is, why haven't a group of people gotten together who got their crap together, who know how to track animals, and just say, hey, let's take off. And as soon as and it's just like your hound dogs. We take, you're hunting coyotes, you're hunting coons, you'll let those dogs go. And when they hunting mountain lion, as soon as they catch a scent, they turn those dogs loose and let them go. You catch a track, let's track him, let's stay on him until we can visually, either come up to their village. But if they're there, they got to leave tracks.
Now that's a great way for a human to think about what Sasquatch is. Over the past 10 years, I started out believing exactly what you're saying, after finding this trace evidence that if that they're just a flesh and blood creature, and that they're all over, not just Wisconsin, obviously, they're everywhere. Not everybody can be crazy. So if they're kind of a flesh and blood thing that's here, I 100% agree with you. If they were this big, why aren't they leaving prints everywhere? Why aren't we seeing broken tree paths or trees of these huge things climbing a tree? And I think there would be evidence galore. But over this time, over the past 10 years, and again, watching my documentaries, you're really going to see that it's totally fact base of what's happening. I'm out in the middle of the woods. And I'm going to say the middle of the woods. And all of a sudden, we're having stones thrown at us from out in the middle of the woods. Now, in my first documentary, you'll actually see Mike, because I brought him in for his skepticism and his hunting ways. That, when he's up in a stand and he wants to maybe drive a rabbit or something out, he'll throw stones to scare the rabbit out to take him out. All right, that's a great point. However, when you're walking several hundred yards on a path and they're always landing by your feet, I don't know what can do that. You'd have to understand what the terrain is in the Kettle Moraine. And if they're not Navy SEALs or First Nation people that are, being able to move through those trees without making a sound and getting around bends and getting at different heights and going through all this different terrain just to get that stone, the next stone, thrown right by our feet, you got to think of the possibility or the probability. It's a hard one. Again, I didn't see what threw it, but they kept throwing them by our feet. And after about 500 yards, I'm like, what the heck? All right. So I'm thinking
stones.
Yeah. And I mean, and you're right. They didn't really seem that big. They were almost, they were bigger than pebble size, but they weren't. I don't know. I don't feel like they wouldn't have done any damage unless you popped it into a BB gun and put it up to someone and,
Right.
But I mean, they were big enough to be thrown though. So they had to have some weight to it. The rocks stopped coming. And I'm like, and I didn't know what this was at first. Again, I'm still learning, right? Still a student of learning this. And so I pick up a bigger rock and I'm like, I'm going to throw it out to where the last set of rocks came from.
Yeah, that'd be the same thing, I think.
Yeah. So I'm like, I pick it up and I throw it, a nice sized rock. I hit the side of a tree. Now I couldn't hit the side of a barn if you told me. But I hit the side of a tree and made a nice pop. And the guy I was hiking with, Sanjay, he's like, oh, that was good. And I'm like, no, watch, they're going to throw them at me because I just threw a rock at them. Just as I was saying, watch, they're going to throw rocks at me. All of a sudden, the distance and the trajectory and the quickness of several stones just come breaking through the tops of the trees, just land right by my feet again.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, I talked to like Mike and even Matt, my brother-in-law, where, he's like, did you hear any type of pop from a slingshot? Again, try to debunk it first, right? Try to understand what just happened. There was nothing and it was silent. It was one of the weirdest things because I was like, wait a minute, if they're this good, this is what I'm thinking. I don't care if it was Bigfoot or a person. They got pretty good aim. And so I'm like kind of going down the trail a little bit more. Like I didn't want to stay in and research this. I don't want to get pegged in the face with a rock. Getting hit with a rock hurts. So, I'm boogieing down, and actually Sanjay kind of followed. And then you'd hear a few more land right where we were at. And so I start documenting it because I record everything, everything, whether it's pictures or video. And I'm sitting there talking, saying, this is what just happened. And just to our right, we hear some rock clacks. And the rock clacks could have been more than 4 feet away from us. Wow. It was really eerie because it was something I never expected. And again, this just was my first year of going out and looking. So it's like I really don't know what to make of that, but I documented it. And so that kept me going out there again and again and again. And I could sit here all night and tell you everything that's ever happened, but I have a lot of things that are captured. And like I said, I put a video, a documentary out, 2 hours. I know it's long, but I did cut it down. It was as long as Avengers Endgame originally, like 3.5 hours. So I really cut down everything that I thought I could. It was still 2 hours. And I put that out in 2019 called Finding Jay. And it's a documentary on Amazon Prime. It's kind of like the beginning part. Oh, there it is.
Right, I am showing you something.
Yeah. That's the cover.
Oh, awesome. That's actually cool.
Of my first one. Now, that film is covering pretty much everything that I was saying, because like I said, I document everything 100% fact-based. I don't care about the people. I don't want to say I don't care, that sounded rude, but I'm not focusing on anything else but where I'm researching in the kettle moraine. That's it. Everything else to me is white noise. Like you said, you can go on YouTube and you can look all these things up. That's great. You don't know if you're being punked or not, right? Everything that's on the YouTube or the internet is true, right? Like that French model, bonjour. Yeah. It's not. And same thing with what you see on films. How do you know if they're true or not? You don't. And even listening to me now,
which hurts the people that were coming up with actual, really honest things. It hurts the people who are doing that.
Yeah, it does. Whenever I speak about this, because I speak at different conventions and events and everything, and I love talking about it, but I always love talking about is going out there and hunting your own truth. Don't take my word on it. Don't watch a video on YouTube or my documentary and just say, oh yeah, Jay's right, or Jay's full of beans. If you're interested in it, I really think that as a hunter, if you are going to go out and do some recon on where the deer are, you're going to find the deer, right?
Right.
Same thing with turkey. If you go out there and you're going to do your recon, you're going to find your turkey. Guess what? If you have a different mindset on what you're looking for, you just may find it. And that's what I call searching for your own truth. Don't, go out and discover for yourself. Don't just accept any answer.
I tell my wife, I'm the kind of guy with my luck. I mean, so much crazy stuff happens with me that I push and I go and it's because I study so hard or I set up. I've learned my quarry and get to know him very, very well. I would probably be that guy that would end up in Bigfoot's arms with a big bear hug, and no one would believe it. But you want to, but there is an individual, and I apologize not having his name, but there is a guy on YouTube that I come up at to me was the most legitimate out of the guys I watch on YouTube. But he's supposedly got 20 photographs of actual photos of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and then he's taken multiple people out, and he says he knows how to go out and see them. And
Todd Standing.
Yeah, that's who it is.
Todd Standing. Well, a lot of people in the field, and that's just it. It gets kind of catty, even in this field, because I don't really believe that there's all this unity like everybody wants, like, the paranormal unity, the Bigfoot unity, the UFO unity. You're never going to find it, and I believe it has a lot to do with ego. Mm-hmm. We're human. We're going to protect what we do, and what we do is right. That's how come it's like, just because, and I know a lot of good researchers out there that do things different than I would, doesn't make them wrong at all. Doesn't, what we're doing is the same thing in just a different way. So it's like, I give anybody who goes out there, I don't care if you just started last week with a flashlight, you're doing that. You're going out and you're trying to find what's not supposed to exist. I mean, we were sitting there talking about, why aren't there prints everywhere, right?
Right.
Why aren't there things broken? And this is where this field even becomes even more broken, or not broken, but at odds with each other, because they say there's 4 different types of Bigfoot. Now we're in Bigfootville, right? Now we're in this one camp, and there's 4 different camps. You've got those that believe that Bigfoot is just a flesh and blood primate that we haven't caught up with yet. Okay, no matter with all your questions, that's what they believe they are. Then there is a second camp called the Woo, and that's with the apers. Actually, the people that believe they're flesh and blood, they're the apers. They believe the other people that think that Bigfoot might be, have all these like cloaking abilities, or they're magical or anything like that. It's woo. So they call those Bigfoot people the Woo. And then there's a third one, which is extraterrestrial Bigfoot, that ETs drop off little drones here and they're just running around the woods. And then you got the fourth camp, and that is the biblical Bigfoot, which they could believe it's a fallen angel or the Nephilim. Yep.
Nephilim. Yep.
Yes. And the thing is, with that, it all depends on where you sit. I think already, I think spiritually,
right.
I say I go by the Bible. I believe that Jesus died for my sins. I have this strong faith in God. And again, you don't see God, but you could feel it, and that's more of a faith. So that's where I am, internally. That's what I feel. And again, when I read the Bible, which I think is like the human operating manual for life, I take this as my learning, my faith in what I believe. So, okay, so getting back to the Bigfoot and why they don't leave things is a lot of times people say, how can Bigfoot just walk around and not be able to do this? Are they levitating? Are they, okay, again, you're getting into the whoa, right? First you got to prove Bigfoot's real. Now you're going to say it has magical powers. I think that they're one with the environment. In a way, it's kind of, if they, back biblical days, Noah was 800 years old. Okay, now you take that literally, or do you say, that was just some guy who was drinking too much wine writing about how old Noah was? Well, what if these Nephilim do have a longevity of life, that they're not your normal man, primate, or ape that live to be 80?
Jay.
Yes.
Will you run out and get my bow real quick? It's raining. I got my recurve sitting on a bale out there, and it's pouring rain. Oh. I'm so sorry.
No, that's good. You're probably looking like, no, my baby.
Well, I like what you're talking about, because, my faith and everything is my bloodline. It's my basis on everything, and my faith in Christ and everything. And I trust him,
brother.
God. But just because we don't can't comprehend it doesn't mean it's not real. And in the realm, God could make anything. When guys were talking about aliens, or God could create another world. I mean, I know it says the heaven and the earth, but I never
Correct.
underestimate the power of what God could create and why he created, and never ask why.
Yeah, amen. I mean, and I honestly think that's what it comes down to, is where you believe it that way, because we can be scientific of what we think we understand because it's there, black and white. It's either there or it's not. But why don't some of these things make sense?
Jay, look at it this way. I put it this way too. They're trying to use science for Sasquatch and Bigfoot and all this other stuff. Yet in the Bible, in our belief, the good Lord made the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Science can't explain that. How could someone make? But in our faith, so that's why you're on the right track. I believe in a God that he made the whole earth and light and animal and everything in there in 6 days. And so what he could make beyond that, we can't even comprehend what's out there.
Yeah, and again, it's like there's no wrong answer of saying what Bigfoot is, because they don't know. We don't know. My faith is going to tell me one way, and other people are going to have theirs the other way. And honestly, at that point, I respect everybody's decision. If they want to say it's an alien, I'm not going to be like, no, it's probably more of a Nephilim. Oh, it's a primate we haven't caught up with. No, everybody has their rhyme or reason. And the thing is, I give that understanding to people. I will not sit there and get in a debate. It's like getting into a debate with God or with the real Jesus. It's like people are going to say, no, that's just an adult Christmas story. That's it, Jay. You're being fooled. It's like, but it's not. And you're going to go back and forth and do all the butting heads doing that. But as far as when it comes to Bigfoot, and believe me, I'm not trying to compare faith in God and faith in Bigfoot, but it's what I believe that what could be possible. And I believe going out there with that openness, that possibility, that I may be able to learn something more, because the first 5 years that I was doing this, I think I was trying to more prove it, that the existence. And then all of a sudden something just kind of hit me to where actually it was the first 4 years where I was actually going out with a big rig out, with my video camera at night with my 2000 lumens flashlight, and I'm just shining it all over. And I'm like, why can't I get Bigfoot to come near me? Well, funny thing is if you're out in the dark, in the woods, minding your business, I usually hike with somebody else, because my wife said if I ever, went alone out into the woods and I died, she'd kill me. So I gotta obey, by her rules. So I usually go out with 2 or 3, 4 tops, but we try to keep that real. But if you're out there, I hike in the dark. That's it. If I need to see, I put on a low red light. That's it. Now, safety, I don't carry a firearm with me. People are like, you're crazy. I do carry no, I carry bear spray, and I've got my cold steel. I've got everything set for the close encounters. But the thing is, when you're out there and you have your flashlight going, all right, let's say you turn it off. Say you're out there and it's just me and you, and all of a sudden you see down the path a flashlight coming towards you. What's your first instinct? Totally dark, right?
Yeah,
totally quiet,
it is.
right? You don't know, it's a person coming, but you don't know what their intentions are behind it.
Don't know if it's a friend
or foe. So when I go out there, and I was bringing a big rig with me, I'm like, no wonder I haven't been getting any results. I'm just sitting there being all, hey, come here, and they're just staying away. But with that, it's kind of, I believe, just like animals have this real strong instinct, dogs, they can sense your fear. Again, depending on what you believe Bigfoot could be, I believe that they have that heightened sense because they live in that environment. And I believe they could, when you are carrying a firearm, that you are walking around a little bit more confident than the next guy. Why? Because if anything comes up to you, you're going to shoot it. You're going to protect yourself. And I believe they can sense your confidence. Like, okay, he's got a weapon on him of some sort that could probably hurt me. I'm going to stay back. Well, I'm trying to more or less, I don't want to sound way too far out there, but make a contact,
Yeah. Carry a box of rocks.
Exactly. Oh, no, right. Exactly.
Oh, he's got rocks.
Yeah, well, he's got rocks, but it's more of the way you, I think, approach it. And this is the way I do it. Again, I can have a lot of people, a lot of my family members just kind of do the head nod when I talk about it. And that's the end of it, because there's nothing more to talk about, because it's where they're at. I don't judge them for that. I really don't. You kind of get used to it, to where, oh yeah, this is Jay. He looks for Bigfoot. And I'm like, wait a minute, that changed too. Because when I go out in the woods, you know what? I don't think me or you or anybody's ever going to find Bigfoot, but like looking for the recon for the turkey or the deer. I believe if you go out there with the right reasons, Bigfoot will find you. Thus, there's the title of my documentary, Finding Jay. It's from a Bigfoot perspective.
Mm-hmm.
To where I came up with a sequel to that actually in 2022. It's on Prime, called Beyond the Kettle, Finding Jay 2. And it just kind of keeps taking you along on this little journey of what is this? And I'm always with somebody. I think that's the cool thing about it, is it's just not Jay, talking about there. Yeah, there you go. Beyond the Kettle. That was my second one. Good job.
Yeah, otherwise I won't show it.
Oh, I have to talk while it's doing it. So there, my wife has already brought it up. See?
Yep. Looks good. Thank you. But it's basically kind of that journey you go with me, with other people that I'm with, experiencing and capturing the weirdness that's out there. Again, okay, so now you can say, Jay, you have all this trace evidence. Okay, we'll just do the air quotes of a foot. I got my first cast this year in January. It was the coolest thing. You get actually, that's not in part 2 either. So I know my wife's listening, but there could be a part 3 in the and again, for that, it's because
there we go. I just got to show this. Here's your cast. That's Shaquille O'Neal's what it was. He was out there.
Well, it's just on how wide they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And but so here's all the kicker, right? You have the trace evidence of a cast that anybody could, I guess, make. Whenever I talk to Mike or Matt, they're like, Jay, there's just somebody out there effing with you. That's what they're doing. And that's very possible. But I think of the situation of the probability more than the possibility. But again, I didn't see what left a print, what threw a rock, what I've seen beady, like laser red eyes without any light shining on them. Like it wasn't a.
You have seen the laser red eyes?
Yes. And I was with 3 other people, and we're looking at them, and they're just popping up in front of us. 1, 2 here. Now I call them eyes because it was pitch dark and they were together. That's, my mind is going to matrix them as eyes. Didn't see what was behind the eyes. Another pair up here, another right there. Yeah, it was.
This is the evil mojo.
Well, and again, I don't know. I talked to my oldest daughter, and she would say it's the banshee or the spirits of the woods, which I'm getting a little bit more into the First Nation outlook here in Wisconsin, on how they look at that, because again, to hunt the truth, I think you have to be a little bit more. The mind has to be open a little bit to be able to say, all right, I'm still going to ground myself. I'm going to be like, you still got your skeptical side, because we're human. We have to, do that. But the other part is that if you are going to listen to the weird, this is in part 2, my documentary, the weirdest owl call I've ever heard. Because I started getting good with the barn owls, the barred owls, everything out in the kettle. And we heard this barred owl out there. And right when they were done, the 2 people I was with, I was like, that's a barred owl. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? Just as I get done saying that, we hear this weird person type owl blah, it's kind of like, ooh, it was weird. I can't even really do that. And it was, no more than 20 yards to my left in the pitch dark. We're in this kind of opening. So I've got a thermal imager, my flare. I pick it up immediately and turn around and look. And I'm like, I'm waiting for a person to be there. That's honestly what I thought. It was a person came way out in the woods, and that's what they're doing. Okay, so I'm looking, and all of a sudden, the thermal imager I have, it was $600, but they've got some out there that are like 10,000. The higher they are, the better the image, the sharper the image. But I caught something that I thought I was looking through a path, and they were on the other side of the path, and they were just like little people. I could see they were bright yellow. And just as we're done with that, the two people come up to me. What are you looking at? I'm like, I don't know. There's a heat signature. I think it's people. I don't know. I'm kind of whispering a little bit. And just right in front of us, just as I pull my thermal down, this orb of light just arcs right in front of us. And right from the area where I saw it, and we're just looking at it. And as soon as it got out of view, you heard a big crash through the trees. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. All right. You're ready to go even further into Nutsville. I'm like, what did I just see turn into a ball of energy to evade us? And then right when it got out of sight, it became solid again. I'm like, all right, I'm like, all right, that's really crazy. But that's when I started reading Ron Moorhead's The Quantum Bigfoot. It's actually my favorite Bigfoot book because I think it touches more on the spiritual.
Quantum Bigfoot.
Yeah, the Quantum Bigfoot, and it's really good. It doesn't mean that this Bigfoot creature. Actually, I'm sorry, this Bigfoot person. I actually call them forest people. I know. I don't sit there and dance around with a wooden flute around a tree or anything. I'm not there. But I really do believe that they have more human characteristics. And what I mean by that is, people say, okay, well, how do you know that? And I'm like, because I've been out there for 10 years and I'm living to tell this tale. I believe that if it was an animal doesn't know what consequences. I run into a mountain lion or cougar out there, or a bear, and it's hungry or it's mad or it's got its cub, it's going to attack me, right? Coyotes, or wild dogs, they're going to attack me without anything. If I believe that these Sasquatches out there, they don't do a thing, because what would happen if Jay goes missing? After I text my wife my coordinates wherever I go, just so she knows if I ever go missing, she knows where the radius would be to look. Where would everybody start looking if I went missing? That's right, into the Kettle Moraine, and they would put an all-out search for it, which would probably disrupt the way they are. So I believe they have a consequence. Now, I don't know. Have you ever seen Finding Bigfoot with Bobo? Okay, well, there's a show that was on in the 2000s, and it was really funny because it was on for a good, I think, 10 seasons, and they'd go out and look for Bigfoot, and Bobo would be like, I always leave Baby Ruth because Bigfoot likes Baby Ruth. And I'm like, I don't go to that extreme. Like, I know what I'm talking about. Again, it's just, it's that feeling. And, just experiencing all this and gathering it and trying to, just decipher it has been, it's been amazing. That was up until March of 24th this year. And that
I'll inject a little bit of my thought, how I am. And I mentioned this to Dan, and when we were talking, I said, dude, let me tell you what, I'm always constantly thinking of how we film and doing things different and trying to gather video and gather the wild, the wildlife and stuff. So I'm telling you right now, if I was heading out to research Bigfoot and Sasquatch and going out there, I got buddies who have drones, and I would be running drones at night with infrared on there, and I would guarantee you, and I would set up and record the sounds, but I wouldn't have to worry about me catching that, because I'd have a dude down there running that drone wherever that sound's coming from, and we'd have to pick up some infrared. So you could kind of, now you're starting to put the science with technology together and start putting that proof. Now, I mentioned to him that, I said, dude, I mean, I'm not a genius, but why aren't people using drones and going out there and with a drone? I don't have to walk out there. I can stand and have, we can record
Well,
but we
they are.
can
They
send out
are.
drones. And he said that, now this is a thing he said. He said that the military had done this, and they took, they recorded and found some these Bigfoots using drones and technology, and the SEALs went right in there and killed them and got rid of them because be honestly, the government doesn't want Bigfoot to be known. He says, think of all these forces and everything that have to be protected, and all the money it's in lumber and all this other stuff. They'd have to protect all these forests because now there's an indigenous animal who lives in here that they don't want known. So
Or because I always hear that too, but I even think bigger than that. What would happen if they were discovered and they were identified? And what if they were identified of saying, wow, this creature that we killed, actually they were able to tell that this thing was 800 years old. What would that start proving? That start proving the Bible and God. And I really look at,
that's
the world.
true.
Yeah. The world that we live in is so evil, so corrupt, so beautiful in so many other ways. Don't get me wrong. But it's, and I do think about that. And believe me, people are bringing out the drones. They're putting on thermal imagers on these. But again, what would happen if you did go out there and you were able to use that? Because remember, the drone, the infrared or thermal can only see as far as what's in front of it. It's only going to give you the surface. There's surface heat, and there's a lot of canopies out there. So all of a sudden you pick something up. Okay, you try to get out there, and by the time you get out there, that thermal image is gone. Just evades or does whatever, because there's been one time when I was out there. This is not in any of my documentaries because there's really no proof. I was out there, and again, we'll jump right back to what you were saying, but it was with my daughter. She was 4.5 at the time. Yeah. And it was during the day. Believe me, I do not take my kids out for Bigfoot bait. I have gotten ripped on that. A lot of my things like, oh yeah, bring your kids out. That's smart. But it was me and my daughter. She was a little girl, little 45-minute hike. It was during February. The paths were icy. She liked ice skating. We're about 150 yards away from my vehicle where we parked. And she's skating around me saying, pull me, daddy, pull me, daddy. And she's just being a little girl, And all of a sudden, out of the right side of my eye, because this is February, everything's brown, no foliage or anything. I see something that looks like it's auburn. And it was just a different color behind these groomed trees in the Kettle Moraine. And I look, as soon as I look at it, it had this shape, almost like it had hair, but it was huge. But I didn't know exactly where I was looking. Later on, I figured out it was about 75. That was close to 80 yards, but it was huge. And as soon as I looked at it, it moved as fast as a fly was taking off before you hit it with a fly swatter. I didn't know what that was. That really freaked me out because I'm like, it was solid. And then I saw the auburn blur. And my daughter's still skating around me like there's not a care in the world. And I'm like, I don't care if I was carrying 2 AKs on me. If this thing moved that fast, my daughter's right here. It's gonna snatch my daughter. That was my fear, and that kind of messed me up for a while during my journey so far, to where I didn't bring my kids out anymore, not even on a day hike, because I like to bring them out just to get them into nature. Not looking for Bigfoot, but just going out there. And
you felt vulnerable,
very vulnerable. So meaning you're going to use your drones. The military can use their drones. They're going to be over everything, and like I said, even if you get to that spot, they're gone. Again, how does your normal flesh and blood primate be able to move that fast? How is it that people say that they can walk right up to you and you didn't even see them come up or leave? How are they not leaving footprints?
Yeah.
Those are still the greater mysteries of it, but the way they move is a tall tale. March 24th this year, I had my very first daytime sighting, and man, it's emotional. Sorry. So every time I talk about it, I go right back to that spot. It was during the day. Me and friend Bryn, she invited me up to her property up in the Kettle, and we were out there for 3.5 hours looking at these different tree structures that were weird, just huge trees just lifted up, 20 feet in the, and it's just so weird. You'd need machinery to do it, or at least 20 guys with ladders. Anyway, so we're out there for about 3.5 hours. We're ready to leave. I always do a hand signal. I talk to the woods when I get there, when I leave. I'm like, hey guys, see you. Maybe I'll see you next week at my area. And I do wear a body cam, not a GoPro, so it's not going where I'm looking.
Right.
But my body cam's looking straight. I look to the right and I have a full view of maybe about 120 yards of just wooded area. And again, March, no foliage, everything's just groomed high. And also I see this black figure just appear from nowhere, and as if it was on skis, it just goes, it was only like for 2 seconds. I mean, I had this whole view of the woods. It came from somewhere, and then it didn't continue like it should. I'm expecting to keep following it, but it just wasn't there. But what I remember out of all this is I remember seeing its head, shoulders, all the way down to the ground. And to me, and it was more that feeling, it was like everything that I worked up till that point, I believed that they were there. Something was there. And now like I said, I get emotional when I talk about it, because it was, a blessing that I was able to see it, that it wasn't for anybody else. No, did I capture it on body cam? No. And I could tell every till I'm blue in the face, and they're just like, okay, sure you did. Or maybe they believe me and they're just, and I get that, because it wasn't them. This was me. So
Do you think it's something that, and I'm going to get, maybe it's a little spiritual thing. Maybe it's something that we're not supposed to, because it's been so hard and so many people. Maybe it's a good thing that maybe it is a kind of a demonic thing, whether it's a Nephilim or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's something that the good Lord doesn't really want us to have in contact, and that's why it's been so hard that we can't. Maybe there's a block there that is not permitting us to make that contact. Maybe it's something that the good Lord is wants, and maybe we're looking. I don't know. I'm just talking.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I had this conversation when I was out over the weekend, and I think it was the same thing. It's kind of like, is there a code? They're supposed to stay on their side of the street. We're supposed to stay on ours, but you know what? You're gonna have a sighting here or there. Well, in this case, it's kind of, and I 100% agree with you, because I actually think it might be a little bit different, because I do a lot of praying, even before I go out there, just for safety, for guidance. That's like I got out of the ghost field a little bit. I was really kind of involved in it, and I was still like, hey Lord, is this okay? I don't want to be like looking for demons or anything like that. Convict me. And he did convict me, but it was about 3 or 4 years into the ghost hunting before I started hitting the woods. However, I agree with you, since we really don't know what Bigfoot is. We really don't. Could it be the same thing, the great deception of demons? Who knows? But I still pray about it, and I'm still not convicted of saying, no, there's nothing wrong with this, because this is more, you're getting out in nature. And I don't know. There's a lot of other researchers I know that have gone out there, and I still talk to them, and they've been doing it for 20 years, 25 years.
I want to make the statement that for myself, I think a lot of people base, because it's the way it is in life. We judge things because it hasn't happened to us, or we can't comprehend. I can say for a fact that I had experience when I was probably 12 years old. Like I said, all my family's from the South, and I had my grandmother we called Mama. She was a very spiritual woman, and I remember that she used to babysit us a lot. and when we were kids, and with my brother and I, and she'd make us at night sing hymns, and then at night I could hear her, she'd always do her moan and stuff, but she was one of these people that had spiritual dreams, and then tell you what was coming to happen through, she believed God talked to her dreams, and that she could speak to beyond. But anyway, she had lived in a little shack down in we called the hills of Tennessee, and our family were down there staying with her, and my mother went down to the church that they had, we call the Holler, and you can look way down there, and she lived in the middle of nowhere, but you could look way down there, and there was a little church. And that night we were sitting on the porch with my father and stuff, and we're watching, and I remember you could hear the people screaming, in the true term of holy rollers, that was it down there. Did you ever experience those people would get up and jump in the aisles and scream, and that night we could hear them all yelling and stuff, and it was, people were worshiping God, and that was their way of doing it. And I remember watching my mom come all the way up the roads and up the mountain, and watching her coming up to the house there, and it was pitch dark, and my mama got out of the car and she went around the back, and my mom came in and said, "Oh my gosh, it was what a beautiful church, was awesome tonight." And I said, my dad's, "Oh, I know, I could hear you guys, you crazy guy here." And all of a sudden my mom said, "It's so beautiful. Why don't you tell Mama?" So I went to look for her. "Get out here. It's beautiful." And she was I remember her laying in bed, and she was telling me, she called me in and said, "Honey, she was having a heart attack." And because of everything, and make a long story short, she had passed away a couple of days later. It took the ambulance like almost an hour and a half just to get all the way to her. And I remember I was so brokenhearted, because that was my first experience with death, and with a loved one. And she was so close to me, and we had experienced so many religious and spiritual moments that she had brought us, my brother, and she was kind of my guidance in that. And I'll never forget, they had her funeral that night, and everybody in the Holler in Tennessee showed up. Everyone loved her, and everybody knew her as this sweet old woman, and and she did everything. She could live right off the mountain. And I remember they were, after the funeral there, they were going to take her up to Michigan, and then she was going to be finally buried, because that's where my papa was buried. He had died of black lung from the coal mines, but they moved to Michigan, so they were going to bury her with him up there. So I remember that my brother and sister went with my aunt and uncle back to Michigan, and I rode with my mother and my dad to drive all the way back to my mama's house back in the sticks up on the mountain to take care of everything. We were going to leave the next day. And I remember and I was sleeping in the bedroom. There's two beds in the bedroom. My mom and dad was across the room, and my bedroom was by the archway that next to the living room was behind me. My mama would crochet and knit in her sleep, and everyone was grandkids. I guess 30 some grandkids. She had knitted stockings and doilies and everything, that. And I remember she'd always be talking, and she'd always be around that rocking chair and crocheting and sleeping. And I was laying in that bed, and I was just so heartbroken. All I could think about was her. And I could feel the presence of her, though, in this house. And all of a sudden, I hear this footsteps walking on the wooden floor behind me in the bedroom. And I'll never forget this, as long as I live. I tried to scream out to my dad, who was 6'3", who was an ex-cop, and I couldn't get a word out. I was whether terrorists, I couldn't get a word out. And all of a sudden I hear the whole rocking chair going back and forth. And that went on, and I just laid there with my eyes staring and could not speak. And it went on, and then all of a sudden, I'm telling you, it's so weird. It's like the next thing I know, I woke up and it was morning. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out if I was in a dream, if I was, something crazy had happened. But I'll never forget this. As I got up, I get out of bed, and I'm telling my mother and father, "Hey, listen to what happened. This is what." And my dad's, "Oh, you were thinking about your grandma, and your mind's playing." And my mother broke down crying. Same thing happened to her. So that was real as can be. And then a year later, my mother and I, my sister and brother, we go back down there, and we're going to take care of the place, mow the grass. And of course, my mom forgets the key. I have to crawl in the window. And this is the last time I've been, or first time I've been in this house since the last experience. We get in there. And like I said, my mother and daughter and sister were sleeping in the living room. My brother and I in that back bedroom again, and she had like two glass doors, the French doors that closed between the kitchen and her little family room or the living room in this little mountain house. And then you could look out the kitchen window and it went right up the mountain. You could see up the mountain. Well, my mom is yelling, and I remember getting up, and the living room is just lit up. And I'm like, what the heck? So I come out, and by the time I get out, it goes from light to dark. And so the story of my mom and sisters, my sister wakes my mother up and says, Mom, there's an angel looking at us. And my mom looks up, and where the glass doors is, she says, this luminate lit up the whole room. It said, look, it was an angel. And my sister are looking at it. And when I come out and when I start, she said it went into a dot out that window, up that mountain, gone.
Yeah.
So how do you explain? So what I'm trying to say, I have experienced that stuff. You don't tell too many people because they're kind of like, do, but I know that anything can be possible.
Oh yeah, 100%. And again, do we know what that is? Definitely. And again, you go back to what you believe, of course, what I believe biblically is that God does talk about angels.
Yeah.
So, therefore I could easily do that. That's why a lot of people it's hard for them to understand me if I'm not talking about it. Like I said, I'm Jay Bachochin of Sound Mind. Depending on what we're going to talk about here, you can get into my beliefs, but you might want to run after you hear them. And I get that. And
that sounds like that's going to be another podcast, Jay. We're going to get more into that.
Definitely.
For our listeners out there, they want to get more info, find out more stuff about you. Where should they go?
You can go to jaybachochin.com. That's my website. And for my website, I try to keep that updated just as much as social media, getting out in the field, seeing galleries of that. Some of what I call trace evidence of what I believe is Sasquatch, and some links to Amazon where you can watch Finding Jay or Beyond the Kettle Finding Jay 2. And also I have a storefront because I'm also a designer. So I designed some cool shirts. And I do have both films available on Blu-ray for purchase right through the website. So
that's awesome, brother. And
thanks.
I enjoyed listening to this. Guys, I mean, check this out, check his website, go through, and it's like me, I'm like kind of like a sponge right now. And I believe that anything, the good Lord, anything could be possible. We were watching, I'm going to get real quick on a biblical thing, but we were watching last night on YouTube, we were watching the prophet Jeremiah, where people thought he was crazy, and God spoke to him and basically go tell the people, hey, you've been living in sin. You have a chance. Now you can turn to God, or I'm going to let the Babylonians wipe you people out and kill you.
Right.
And so because they couldn't understand or didn't, what he went through, idiot, he was a liar, he was crazy, but at the end he turned out being, he was the dude that was right and stuff like that. But
again, that's when you do it. You know what? I always say this, and this is basically how I'll end whenever I speak, whenever I talk or present, is I say, what? There's approximately 8 billion people in the world, and each of them has their own truth. So think about that. Go out and discover it for yourself to find your truth. And the truth is, I always say, number one is God, the Bible, Jesus. Yeah. That's the truth. When people talk about the other truth is Bigfoot. Believe me or not, if you hold an interest in it, don't just accept what I'm saying. Go out, just like the turkey recon or the deer recon. I'll tell you what, you go out with a different mindset, Bigfoot might just find you.
I'm gonna party with him. Hey, dude.
Daryl.
We're here to party.
Daryl, let's
like to picture I'd like to picture my Bigfoot with a t-shirt tuxedo that he's here to party because I like to party.
No, he's gonna wear a shirt that says, I saw George once, but nobody believes me.
There you go, Harry. He struck worse than I did.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
Mark Mitten, we have a mutual friend that we respect, but Barry Wenzel and Barry is, he's hunted all over Alaska. He's hunted everything. And, Mark was honest. He said, dude, you got to talk to Barry because Barry is big. He believes in the aliens and he believes in Bigfoot. And I said, no way, really? He says, because he's a very smart man. And because there's been things that he's seen that he can't explain in the wild, out in the wild.
Again, when
That
it
has to
happens,
be so.
that's what I'm saying is if you and I were out hiking one time and I had my back turned and you saw something, and by the time I looked at it, I didn't see it, but you saw it. It's what you saw. It's hard for people to understand. It's not like I would just say, no, you didn't. It's like you saw it with your eyes. That's going to be what you need to decipher what it is.
And respect where this guy's coming from. And let me tell you what, the average Joe who sits and lives in a neighborhood in the suburbia area who never gets out, he do not make any judge when you don't leave, more than, the only thing is where the 7-Eleven and the bank and everything else is. But Jay, I appreciate your time. I can't wait to get back with you. Maybe I'll get a sighting of Bigfoot before you. I always tell
It'd be awesome.
I always tell a quick joke, and I'll end on this joke. I always tell guys, I said, man, I was bow hunting in Kentucky one time. I was way back in the middle of the hills and back in the holler. And I said, I was sitting there hunting bear. And I said, and this big black, it was right in the dark. I said, I was getting ready. And this thing, man, I thought it was a black bear. It stood about 8 foot tall though. And I never seen a bear that big, and it had long arms and long legs, but it had these huge feet. And I just wasn't sure. And it stood underneath me for the longest time. It actually kind of spooked me. So that night, the next day, I went into the Department of Natural Resources and said, hey man, I had this experience. Is there a different type of bear? And I explained to it, I said, this thing was tall. It was hairy, had long arms and big feet. And they told me, said, man, don't shoot them hillbillies.
Oh, oh God, that's good. I like it. I like it though. I like it. And it could be true. So
no, I don't. I think it's something that beyond it's definitely, I'm agreeing with you. I believe it's something that's different in our world and something that we have definitely don't have a knowledge and comprehension of. That's beyond our comprehension. So
it's
anyway,
beyond
Jay,
it.
I appreciate your time, buddy. And folks, if you like it, please subscribe to what we got here and reach out, check what Jay's, go to Legendary Gear USA. You'll check out what's that?
Waterfowl call.
Oh, and you want one of our waterfowl? I gotta plug the waterfowl calls and turkey calls. Hey, you guys, waterfowl and turkey callers, go to Legendary Gear USA. Everything is tuned by and designed by me, tuned by me, and putting all the personal touch in there. But I appreciate it, Jay. And you folks out there, always remember, hunt safe, hunt smart, and may the good Lord be your guide.
Well, I'll be out there, rain is shining, all a part of the great design. Bring it on, I can never get enough, because that's what legends are made of.